Chapter 1, Introduction to Parasitology, Parasites of Domestic and Wild Animals. We have to keep in mind, most animals are going to be infected by at least one or more species of parasites, okay, whether we're talking wild or domesticated. Okay, when I say one or more parasites, I'm talking not just one little bitty, tapeworm in the gastrointestinal tract of a cow. I'm not talking one little liver fluke in a sheep or a goat that's up the side of a mountain. No, what I mean is there's more than one species. There's going to be a liver fluke, a lung fluke. There's going to be something growing in the gastrointestinal tract of that goat that's up the side of the mountain. Okay? It's been studied. You see here on the left, this is just, again, I forget which paper I found this in. It was nice colorized. And they captured, water buffalo, field mouse, a rabbit, and they went through and they found that they were riddled. You look up at the top there, and B, those are, what are they? They are worms that are going to be in the large intestine. C, right there, are going to be different bacteria, tuberculosis bacteria growing in the lungs. There's going to be something in the liver. There's going to be something, parasitic in the lungs, maybe somewhere in the muscles, something that, they ate, penetrated out, now sitting in the muscles, waiting for it to be eaten by a carnivore. Same with the mouse. They're in C. You look at, E and F there. F is, different eggs that are going to be found in that wood mouse. E is going to be some form, I believe that's, let me see here, I've got a note here so I don't make an ass of myself and say the wrong thing. Dominated by the gastrointestinal tract, some form of a worm. I've never heard of it. Helicomaticized polygyrus. And since it's an adult form of that worm in the mouse is the definitive host, it's shedding out oocytes, basically fertilized eggs. The rabbits are going to be riddled. Bot flies, fleas, ticks. You see there in FGH, those are going to be different parasitic eggs that are going to be found in the fecal pellets. I there is some form of a tularemia, I think that's what it says. But when you start, however you look at it, wild animals are riddled. It's not like they found one rabbit had one type of egg in it, found another rabbit and all they found was the tularemia, one had the virus. No, one rabbit had this list, another rabbit had this list, and there was overlap. Third rabbit, fourth rabbit. First mouse, second mouse, third mouse, different oxen, different, it just keeps going on and on. So whenever you look at, you're going to have to take into account they're riddled. But somehow we don't end up with what are referred to as epizootics. Epizootics are going to be mass deaths. Whole herd of buffalo suddenly die out within a few days, a few weeks of each other. Nobody knows why. Well, it turns out, a parasite went rampant through them, and they were all starving to death because they couldn't eat enough to overcome the nutrient deficit from having all these worms in them taking up the nutrients. Couldn't get in enough nutrients to keep the heightened fever temperatures there high enough going. So they are burning through their stored reserves. We don't have this happen. Has it happened? Will it happen? Does it happen? Sure. But it's not an everyday occurrence. It's not an every year occurrence, every decade. because there is a balance. Remember, if the parasites win out too much, their hosts die off. Parasites die off. So there's got to be a balance. Parasites are winning, hosts get a little, hosts recover, parasites go down. So you'll see this waxing and waning, this teeter-tottering effect, which we'll talk about more in the next chapter in the next sections. We're talking ecology and evolution. Domestic, just because, on the previous slide I showed wild animals. And everyone's like, okay, yeah, it makes sense. But good thing I only eat farm-raised pork or farm-raised beef. No, turns out beef and pork, even here in the U.S., they're going to have some parasites, okay? Depending upon how the farm is, the pens that they're going to live in can be small. Maybe it's not a full pasture. Maybe it's just a small pen. So that means they're grazing, especially if they're talking cattle, they're grazing on grasses and weeds that either that cow or one of the neighboring cows around them has defecated on. Worms in the cow pass out eggs in the feces, which fall on the grass. Yeah, for the most part, cows aren't going to eat dung-covered grasses. Rain's going to wash away the dung, but it's going to leave the eggs there. The eggs are going to be attached to the grasses, which the cows are not going to eat. So we have these large herds, dairy cattle, beef cattle. We have large herds, small pens, small enclosures. That's what's going to happen. Now, before you sit there and say, oh, I only eat open range, well, also it's going to happen there too, just not to the same degree. So when you look at it, the cows are defecating on their food source. They're not eating the dung-covered grass, but the rain washes away the dung. The eggs have evolved to be able to have little hooks and things that allow them to attach to the grasses, the weeds, which the cows are going to eat, and they're going to inoculate themselves again, or they're going to inoculate a neighbor, and this just keeps going and going. It's also why it's safer now. Don't get me wrong. The beef, the pork that we eat here and now in the States is way, way safer than it used to be. If you think back, your grandparents, your great-grandparents were always telling you to cook pork well done. The reason being, same thing we see here with the cows. The pigs would poop near where they're eating. They would some inadvertently ingest Tania eggs, different parasitic worms, which would burrow out of the gastrointestinal tract into the musculature. The same musculature we're going to turn into a ham or a pork chop. You eat that musculature, eggs that larvae hatch out of their little whatever they were in, they're now in you. You now have worms. Only way to not let that happen, cook the hell out of the pork chop. Cook the hell out of that ham. You raise the temperature up enough, eggs damaged, larvae dead. Now, because of factory farming, the way we don't allow the pigs to forage out there where they were eating the same grasses that cows or other pigs had pooped on. We're now watching what they eat. We don't let them forage and eat dead roadkill and stuff like that. Dead roadkill. It's kind of like double saying the same thing. Anyways, the parasitic load we now see in modern cattle, modern pig, modern chickens. While it's still there, it is now way lower than it has ever been in recorded history. So we don't have to cook the pork, the steak, to leather doneness. We can eat a medium rare pork chop and like its juiciness. Unless you're kosher or whatever, and then you don't. Sorry. So we're going to see that when it comes to wild animals, like I said in the previous slides, they're going to be riddled. The weak animals, the ones that can't handle having a high parasitic load because the nutrients, being deprived of all the nutrients, things like that, they're going to die off. Okay, they're not going to have the nice plumage. They're not going to have the nice racks. so that they can go and fight off the other males and rut. The peacock is not going to have the nice plumage. Got to remember, that's what the racks are for. The plumage, the colors, all of that is to show I can get food, I can get enough food, and even though I've got some parasites, the parasitic load in me is not so high that I can't take care of myself. Because if they can't, no bright colors, no nice fur, no nice antlers, and so on. Weak, die, and if they don't die directly, they don't get to mate. So whatever it was genetically that allowed them to be weak, to not be able to handle the high or higher parasitic load, doesn't get passed on. With wild animals, they have a greater range, okay? I mean, you look at the American bison. The American bison would range, all along the Midwest, all along the Great Plains, traveling thousands of miles a year. Nowadays, cattle may move a couple of miles from one side of the farm to the other. Done. So those big ranges, those big movements means they're not going to be eating, dung-covered grasses. The carnivores are not going to be eating totally riddled, prey animals. And I keep referring to land animals. Just got to remember, fish are also riddled. One of the good things about living here in the middle of the U.S. is we don't get fresh, ocean fish. All of our fish is going to be flash frozen and then transported. Parasites don't like being frozen. They can't handle it. So you go to the local sushi place, Sushi Eye. We love that place. We go there. I can eat the salmon. I can eat the raw fish, the eel, and all of that, and I don't have to worry. If we lived on the coast, we lived Southeast Asia, where they catch it, and within an hour, it's on somebody's table being eaten raw. There's a reason why people in Southeast Asia are riddled with parasites. Nowadays, they freeze them, flash freeze them, or they do things. They have sushi chefs that are trained to look for the signs of a parasitic riddled fish or animal. They can take care of that or not use it. They'll chop it up and put it in a soup or something else. Yeah, I'll tell you right now, if you've ever eaten an ocean fish or even some freshwater fishes, you've eaten a parasite. It just was cooked, so it was dead. We also got to take into account zoonosis, okay? A lot of what we're going to be exposed to is not going to get on us because of an insect bite, a tick, a flea, or a mosquito. Little Fido, little Fifi at home, your cat, your dog, are also going to be a source of, different things that you're going to get exposed to. Any animal, wild or domestic, can pass on something to us. It's just can't handle being in us. As you see here with the cutaneous larval migrans. Some of the different roundworms prefer to be in a cat or a dog. Getting into us because we walked across the grass that, your dog, Fido, had pooped on weeks ago when the eggs are still there. They may have, attached to your foot and have hatched, and worms are now crawling up, or the eggs hatched and you now have some worms just waiting for something to walk across. And instead of Fido's foot pads, it's your bare feet. Yeah, turns out if you love walking barefoot like I do, there's a good chance you've picked up a worm or two. And we'll talk more about that in the later chapter.